Welcome again to Lakeshore Focus, a weekly show highlighting the key issues, important events, and interesting people in our region. I'm Keith Kirkpatrick. Prior to the desegregation of the United States, black people and other minorities were not accepted into sports leagues. Because of this, they formed their own professional baseball teams, sometimes called the Negro Major Leagues. 7 successful leagues began in 1920 and continued to play through the 1950s when baseball was desegregated. Today we're joined by 2 former players, Walt Owens and Tom Neff. So Walt and Tom here. So,
yes.
So everybody from the audience could figure
Absolutely.
this out.
Okay.
Now probably the first question that probably our viewers are saying is, why is there a white guy on a show about the Negro Ball League, right? So why is that, Tom?
Well, it's from my experience when I was 15 years old and I was looking for a place to play in the summer. I'd just finished my sophomore year in high school, had finished pitching for a team in the Police Athletic League, and the fact that my Legion team, where I might have been able to play, had already qualified pitchers and that, I was kind of without a place to play for the summer. A friend of mine called me and he said, Tom, do you know Bert Tarboro? And I said, yeah, I go to school with him. He says, no, his dad has a team. He says, now they're all Negroes, he says, but would you want to pitch for them? He's looking for a pitcher. Well, I love the game of baseball so much, I just wanted to pitch. So I went and called Bert Sr. He asked me if I would meet him at this one baseball field in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and for a little tryout. He brought his catcher with him at the time. And I told Bert that I didn't have an overpowering fastball, but I did have some good control and other off-speed pitches that I thought would be okay. Well, I went through the tryout, and at the end, I didn't know whether or not he would select me to play for the team. But he called me over to the back of his car, opened his trunk, and handed me a uniform. And I said, well, when's our first game? And he said, tonight, and you're pitching. So I didn't have time to worry about it or anything,
So
and I went.
You jumped right into it.
I jumped right into it. So.
Wow. Now, this is interesting because when we set the show up, Walt, I didn't really know this about you. As we first started talking, you actually said you were here a black guy who played in the white team. So this is almost turned into. So how did your career start?
Well, it started in the alley. We would play in the neighborhood in the alley. And I wasn't that good. I'd, strike out. Finally, the guy said, hey, I got his last strike. Then pretty soon they said, well, I got the second strike, you get the last one. But I kept playing, and finally I figured out that I'll just have my own team. And that way I can bat where I want to, I could pitch when I want to, play where I want to. And
so were you a pitcher?
Yes.
Okay, I ended up with 2 pitchers. Okay,
Yeah.
This is interesting.
I think he was better.
I don't know.
And so I formed this team, and we went up to a field called Northwestern High School Field. It was right next to the Olympia.
Now this is in Chicago?
In Detroit.
Oh, this is Detroit, okay.
Where Gordie Howe, that was his home,
Okay.
Olympia. And that was the big house. But now Michigan has taken over the name of the big house. But we'd go up there and we played, and we became very successful from the time we were 12 to the time we were 18. We won the championships. And
now, was your team all black, or
no,
it was just a mix, or what?
It was all black at first, and
Okay.
then we started adding 1, 2. And
You took guys in like Tom?
oh yeah,
If they could play, right?
definitely.
Okay.
And eventually, I'm in high school, so I'm getting to meet other kids. And I'd get a kid from the Catholic League and one from this league. And we were so good, it was unbelievable. And then one day, the American Legion's nationals were in town, and it was out at Belle Isle, which is a well-known place in Detroit, but they got rained out. And the fields at Northwestern were second only maybe to Tiger Stadium. So all the scouts came up. And by the end of the first inning, I think we were up 30-1. And everybody started clowning. And one guy wanted to pitch, and one guy wanted to switch. And So I would let them change around, and finally the scouts came up to me and say, hey, you guys are good, but you really putting an ugly name on baseball.
That must have made an impression on you.
Yeah.
So just, you know.
Be serious about it.
Yeah. And I also was a stickler for rules. And when guys pull their foot off base, and I would get after the umpire about it. And we had professional umps come in for the championship game. And I was after, I said, oh, he pulled his foot, he pulled his foot. And so when the game was over, the umpire said, come with me, and took me into the clubhouse. And he took off his coat, laid it down, and I saw a gun on his hip. I said, oh, God, what's up? I said, he's going to shoot me. And he said, you know, you're a good ball player, but, hey, if the ball beats the rudder to the bag, he's out. If the guy leaves his foot on the bag all the way through, so the guy would need his foot amputated by the time the league was over. And I got the message. But
so you got disciplined a couple of times by a few people.
Yeah.
Were you in the same kind of? Did you kind of screw around a little bit too? Like
I don't think so. I took the game seriously. You know, I was playing, and it was a good bunch of ball players that I played with. And one of the things that I consider from that time, Keith, is that it really became a defining time in my life, in the sense of it led me to a time from early on to be non-judgmental.
Now, where did you play at?
I played in basically in eastern Pennsylvania. We played in 2 leagues. We played in the Tri-County League. We played in the Church League. But we also barnstormed around in northern New Jersey, New York State, and Philadelphia, and played really good quality Negro teams from those areas.
Now, this barnstorming concept, you both barnstormed, right? So
Definitely.
what is barnstorming?
I was barnstorming with the black team, and we would go to Canada. And the guys on the team would come and ask, I was 14, they'd come and ask my mother.
You were playing when you were 14 and traveling? Mm-hmm. Okay, you must have been good.
I wasn't as good as I thought I was. And so they would ask my mother, say, well, we're going to take your son over to Canada, and we'd like to get permission. My mother said, oh, no, you're not taking my son out of the country. And see, the tunnel and the Ambassador Bridge was right there in Detroit, and it was just like 7 miles or 10 miles to go to Canada. But my mother thought it was forever.
The other side of the world.
Yeah. And she said, oh, no, oh, no. So finally, one of the guys went to church, same church she did. She said, Mrs. Owens, we will look after him, take care of him, and we won't be cursing. And she said, okay.
And did they keep their word?
Yeah, as far as I know.
You mean
I didn't know any words.
You're telling me they didn't curse at all while you were around, while
No.
the 14-year-old was around?
I don't recall.
How about the teams you were on? Were they
No,
active?
actually it was, you know, there was just a total respect that they showed me as a pitcher, you know, and things like that. There wasn't any, like I said, clowning around or anything like that. We were serious about playing the game, but we did have fun together.
Not like Walt when he was younger, huh? Now, what year was this for you?
1960, I was 15 years old.
Okay, and you played until?
60, pretty much 66 when I got drafted.
Okay, so, and for you, Walt, when did you kind of start? When you were 14, and was what year?
It was in the 40s.
Okay, late 40s, I assume?
Yeah, I would say late 40s.
Okay.
I'm 81 now.
Okay, and you played until when?
I played up until I had a stroke in 07.
You were still playing?
Yeah, the Cubs drafted me in 2008
Okay.
and gave me a signing bonus and flew my wife and I to Disney World.
Really? So, but you were playing back in that means you were playing in the 50s and 60s, particularly when the Negro Leagues and so forth were, and the teams were more segregated.
Right. And so I was in high school, and St. Louis Browns wanted to sign me. And I went home, told my mother. My mother said, oh, no. I said, but Mom. She said, oh, no, you're going to college. I said, Mom, but they wanted to sign me, you know. And they signed one of the guys that was on my team named Roosevelt Evans. He was an All-American track and cross-country runner and a fabulous pitcher, but he never wanted to pitch. I did all the pitching because it was my team. And only when he got in trouble in the American Legion game, 9th inning, bases loaded, nobody out, I told the guy to bring him in. Oh, no, he's outfield. I said, no, he's a pitcher. Came in, struck out the side, and we went on into the regionals. We went all the way up. And the team that beat us was the one that won the national championship out of Detroit at the time. But
and what was the first league you played in then? When you were 18, then what did you do?
I came home from college, and I played in they call it the DBF, Detroit Baseball Federation. And they were producing people like a dime a dozen. And it was David Busher, Willie Horton, John Mayberry, Frank Tanana.
These are big names.
Oh, yeah. They were.
So back when you were both playing this game, it sounds like this was kind of the heyday of baseball. I mean, it sounds like there was teams all over the place and opportunities to play in many ways. Is that true?
My recollection, Keith, was that it was a time when baseball was traditionally and held to the title of national pastime. In other words, local towns had their teams that would play in leagues and things like that. When we'd go and travel and play, it was nothing on a Sunday afternoon to be playing before 1,500 people from the town that, after having gone to church or had their lunch and meal and things like that, would come out to the ballpark. It was the Sunday afternoon thing to do.
So how did the segregation part play out for you? Did you always feel like you were able to play with white players and get into wherever you wanted to play?
Well, with this team that I organized, and we grew up together until we were 18, so I decided that I wanted the team to be in the DBF, Detroit Baseball Federation. So I went and applied for them to come in. We would have been in Class D, 18-year-old bracket. Mm-hmm. And the guy named Bigelow said, no. He said, we're not going to have any black teams in here. I said, well, our team is mixed. He said, we're not going to have it. And he said, it won't work. He says, as soon as a black guy slides into third base and upsets a white guy, he said, there'll be a race riot. And I said, but hey, we've been together. But from that point, I went to college, and my mother made an agreement with me that if I made the team at Western Michigan, I could sign. So I went there on a basketball scholarship and a music scholarship. So
you're a talented guy.
So they had, but I always ran into somebody that was so much better. So I ended up trying out for the baseball team. And, well, the first incident of segregation was I was waiting to talk to the coach. I had arrived at the field house. And I'm looking at this board. It was nothing but track records. And I'm looking at it, and one of the coaches came up and says, hey, you think you can break some of those records? I said, no. I said, I don't run track. He said, what do you mean you don't run track? I said, I don't run track. He said, your name is Owens, isn't it? Well, they were referring to Jesse Owens.
Right. And of course you had to be related, right?
Yeah, I am related in a distant, very distant way.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. And so he said, oh, you'll run track before you leave here. So I went in and talked to the coach, Bill Perigo, and I was on the basketball team. Freshmen couldn't play varsity back in those days. So after a year, he left. He got hired to coach at Michigan. And I begged him. I said, take me with you, take me with you. So he stuttered. And then they brought in a new coach. And he didn't like my game. He said I was too fancy. And one day I had talked to him about why I only get in 5 minutes at the end of every practice. He said, well, the Globetrotters play before people, and they they put the show on before the game. He says, they don't put the show on during the game. And years later, because some of the guys I played with also played with the Globetrotters, gave me a tape. They put the show on during the game at the World Championship against the Lakers, putting on all the fancy things. Right. And I wanted to take it and show it to him.
Well, you know, one of the things I wanted to talk about, because having really more like studied that period of time, how did you feel you were treated when you traveled around? Because I mean, this was still in a time that, you know, blacks were only allowed to go in certain places and whites were allowed. And how did you experience that, being with a team of black players?
I think one of the early recollections I have in that first year, it was about the 4th or 5th game when we had gone to play a team, and this was a team in North Philadelphia we played. And on the way back, my manager had said, hey, ride with the guys from North Carolina because you know where this restaurant is. And, you know, so we'll all meet there for a little dinner after the game and things like that. So I was with them in the car, and we got to the restaurant. And just coincidentally, at that time, there was a whole bunch of white people coming out of the restaurant, like from a banquet or something like that. So I was sitting on the passenger side in the front, and I got out the door, and I started up toward the restaurant, and the horn honked. And I turned around, I walked back, I said, what's the problem? And the guys from North Carolina said, are we allowed to go in there? In other words, they had, from their perspective in North Carolina, where there were things for coloreds only and whites only.
So were they allowed to go in?
Yes, absolutely. Okay.
So it was different then.
It was different. And my experiences, like I said, I grew up in the projects there, and in the area that I grew up in, it was government housing projects that were built during the war for the workers, you know, with the expanded mill business and things like that. Afterwards, they became federal housing authority projects for low-income families. And in that very racial and ethnic diversity there, I was just very comfortable with everybody. It wasn't like...
Because you were used to it.
And I didn't see evidence of segregation. It was only my understanding, and then talking with these guys from North Carolina, where I really fully understood what it was like for them, where they were living in a segregated
So a lot of what you experienced was kind of a little more subtlety, it sounded like. It wasn't quite always in your face in terms of how you were treated.
Well, playing with blacks, being a light-skinned Negro, you would get razzed from the blacks,
from both sides,
and you get it from the whites. And sometimes when we were barnstorming, the black guy says, well, hey, go in there and get a pound of bologna and a loaf of bread. I said, well, I can't go in there, sign. I know, yeah, you'll get in there, there'll be no problem. I said, no, but the sign says, no, you just go in, you'll be okay. I go in, I get the bologna and the bread and come back out. And then they would razz you about being white, you know.
So you just had to act a little Italian
or something, you had
right?
to.
Yeah. Well, Walt, I want to ask you a question, because you mentioned earlier that the Cubs drafted you at 75. How does that happen? I thought, you know, once you're 40, you're washed up. So how do you get drafted
Well, I
at
had
75?
speed, no. Well, I did have. But
that's why you have this Cubs uniform back here that we were...
Yeah, what happened was that they decided to have a commemorative draft for the Negro ball players that didn't go pro.
Okay.
So the Cubs drafted me 5th. I was the 5th person in the first round.
Really?
And
so that's why you got to have an official Cubs uniform, huh?
Yeah. And Billy Williams gave me the jersey,
Right.
and Dave Winfield gave me the plaque, and Bud Selig shook all the guys' hands that were drafted. And so that's how that came.
That's how you got the Cubs. But you also have a... Is this what you're... Did you have something similar to this?
No, no.
Dave Winfield gave me that one.
Okay.
In fact, he didn't want to give it to me. He says, he said, well, hey, you're too young to have played in the league, you know. I said, no, I was there. I said, I played, and a guy that was with him says, oh, I know Walt Owens. He says, he played against us with the House of David. And I don't know if you know who the House of David is.
No.
Yeah.
The guys that had these long beards.
Oh, okay.
Out of Benton Harbor. And Satchel Paige pitched that day, and I blooped a hit on him.
So just we're down to really just a couple minutes. Just maybe just a memorable moment from your history. It's going to be a short story here. So.
Okay, well, one of the things you mentioned, how we were treated, and there were times when I was playing, like in an all-Negro environment, like where the crowds were just all Negro, my team was that, you know. There were things that were yelled at me too, at times, but you know, to me, it was all part of a game and things like that, you know. But the respect that I had for my teammates overshadowed anything that could have been done in any way that I had. You know, I just had unbelievable time with that team, playing with them during that time.
We're down to about 30 seconds, so just some memorable thing from your...
I was playing in Louisville, and I was on deck, and the fouling batter behind me came up too, and he said, "See that sign?" And they had girls walking around with signs saying, "All in, people out by sundown." And I said, "So what's going on?" He said, "Well, see that guy over there? He was yelling and yelling." I said, "I'll get him." And it just so happened I fouled the ball, and I tried to hit him. He was right next to the screen.
Did you hit him?
Oh, yeah, got him right in the eye.
Well, we're going to have to end with that story, but that's a good story. He probably deserved it. So thank you both for being here today. Really appreciate it. And we could have probably gone on for several hours about these stories. Maybe we'll get you guys back again, all right? Thank you.
Yeah.
Today on Lakeshore Focus, you heard about the good old days, or were they? Often we revel in the past, remembering all the good things about that period. It's okay to reminisce, but we must also recall the not so good to appreciate the sacrifice of those who fought for change and what we have learned. We have come a long way in terms of how we treat people in this country, yet we still have a ways to go. The current battle rages over gay rights. We have witnessed the struggle for women, handicapped, Black and Latino peoples as they gain rights and privileges previously withheld or restricted earlier. Earlier in the 20th century, there were challenges for those of Irish, Polish, and Eastern European descent, to name a few. Just about every group that was seen as different from the general population has been treated in ways that we might describe as less than just. In fact, it has sometimes been absolutely horrible. One day, I hope we will get it right, but there seems to be something in the nature of humans that makes us want to treat others in lesser ways. I hope each of you, our viewers, continue to make a commitment to see all people as equal and worthy to be treated as such. More importantly, we should take actions to reflect that value and advocate, instruct, and fight, if necessary, for others to do the same. Thanks for watching Lakeshore Focus. What are your thoughts about this show? Did we inspire or inform you in some way? Send your comments to our email address, which is on the screen, or reach us through our website, which is also listed. You can visit the website and watch previous episodes of Lakeshore Focus. Tell your friends and family to check out our great shows. Join us next week for another Lakeshore Focus. I'm Keith Kirkpatrick saying, make a positive difference in our world today.